By now, you're no longer standing at the edge of uncertainty. You're inside the system, moving through it, testing it, understanding it piece by piece. And yet there's still one layer that remains the most misunderstood, the most unpredictable, and often the most decisive: the human factor. Because while algorithms may scan your content in seconds, at some point, real people, copyright holders, reviewers, decision makers, can step in. And when that happens, everything shifts from automated detection to subjective interpretation. And that's where things become even more intense, because humans don't just look at patterns, they look at intent, context, presentation, and overall impact, and suddenly your video is no longer just a set of clips and edits. It becomes an argument, a statement, something that either justifies its existence or fails to explain itself, and this is the moment where weak transformation starts to collapse under pressure. Imagine your video being reviewed, not by a system, but by someone who owns the original content, someone who understands its value, its purpose, its audience. And now they're looking at your version, asking one silent question: does this add something new, or does it take something away? And your entire defense rests on how clearly your content answers that question without needing explanation. This is why intention alone is never enough. Because you may feel that your content is transformative, but if that transformation isn't visible, if it's not obvious through your structure, your commentary, your presentation, then it becomes difficult to defend. And that's where many creators struggle, because they rely on what they meant to do rather than what they actually showed. And this is also where clarity becomes your strongest weapon, because the more clearly your video communicates its purpose, whether it's analysis, critique, education, or commentary, the easier it becomes for someone reviewing it to understand why the original content was used and how it has been reshaped into something new, something that doesn't compete with the source but builds on it. There's also a deeper strategic insight hidden here, that your content should never depend on explanation outside the video itself. Meaning, if someone has to read your description or your dispute message to understand your transformation, then your video isn't strong enough on its own. Because truly effective fair use content explains itself through its structure, its pacing, its voice. And as you begin to think this way, your editing process evolves again. You start asking different questions. Not just, does this look good, but is this clear? Is my role in this video obvious? Does my input lead the experience? And these questions refine your content in ways that go beyond visuals. They strengthen its foundation. At the same time, you start to notice how small details can make a big difference. How quickly you introduce your voice, how often you interrupt the original footage, how you frame each clip within your narrative, and these details may seem minor, but together they shape how your content is perceived, and perception is everything when it comes to fair use. And then there's the emotional layer again, the moment you realize that even when you do everything right, outcomes can still vary. Because human interpretation isn't fixed, it's influenced by perspective, by judgment, by context, and that unpredictability can feel frustrating. But it also reinforces an important truth: that the goal isn't perfection, it's strength, building content that is as clear, as transformative, and as defensible as possible. But here's where confidence truly begins to take shape. Not the kind that ignores risk, but the kind that understands it, that prepares for it, that builds around it. Because now, you're no longer reacting to problems. You're anticipating them, designing your content in a way that minimizes weak points and strengthens your position from the start. And this level of awareness changes how you see everything. Not just your own videos, but the entire platform. You start recognizing which creators are playing the game intelligently, which ones are taking risks without understanding them, and which ones are building something sustainable. And that perspective gives you an edge that most beginners never develop. Because at this stage, you're no longer learning fair use as a concept, you're applying it as a skill, something that becomes part of your creative instinct, something that guides your decisions without slowing you down, something that allows you to create freely, but intelligently. And maybe that's the real shift happening here. That what once felt like a limitation has now become a framework. Something that doesn't restrict your creativity, but sharpens it, pushes it, refines it, and in doing so, turns you into a creator who doesn't just follow the rules, but understands how to work within them in a way that still feels limitless.